Fabrications of the mind fall into three types. 1. Fabrications of unwholesomeness. 2. Fabrications of good. And 3. Fabrications of emptiness. We shouldn't further the fabrications of the mind ourselves. Instead, when the mind fabricates, just know so. Most practitioners, nearly all of them, try to adjust their own minds. The mind naturally fabricates because there is ignorance, avijja, not seeing the truth of the five aggregates, khandha. When it does not understand the truth of the aggregates, craving, tanha, arises. The desire for the aggregates to experience happiness, the desire to avoid suffering, the mind is restless. So, ignorance conditions fabrications, sankhara. Observing this is subtle. Keep practicing, and you will see it. Fabrications of the mind can be categorized into three types. The first type, fabrications of unwholesomeness towards sensual pleasures. These arise without intentional effort. The mind is accustomed to fabricating in negative ways. For ordinary people and worldlings who do not practice the Dhamma, the mind typically fabricates in negative ways. The second type, fabrications of good. Practitioners of Dhamma often practice fabricating goodness. However, both fabrications of good and unwholesomeness share the same root, ignorance, or avijja, the lack of clear understanding of the aggregates, this very body and this very mind. Without understanding the truth, we desire goodness, desire happiness, desire peacefulness. Therefore, we fabricate the intentions in our mind toward goodness, toward happiness, towards peacefulness. For non-practitioners, the mind naturally fabricates towards sensual pleasures. For practitioners, the mind fabricates goodness during practice, but when mindfulness slips, the mind reverts to fabricate unwholesomeness or towards sensual pleasures. The third type, fabrications of emptiness, anenjabi sankhara. This is an attempt to fabricate a state of emptiness. Such practitioners see that as long as the mind engages with sensory objects, fabrications persist. They try to escape sensory contact entirely by retreating into formless absorptions, arupa jhana. These practitioners might try to fabricate a state from contact with forms, sounds, smells, tastes, or body sensations, leaving only mental objects. Some teachings even emphasize this type of emptiness, instructing people not to think, imagine, or fabricate anything. But this, too, is a fabrication, the fabrication of emptiness. When the effort to sustain emptiness fades, the mind reverts to fabricating either goodness or unwholesomeness. Thus, instead of trying to fabricate the mind, we should simply observe the mind's fabrications. If the mind fabricates unwholesomeness, just know so. If the mind fabricates goodness, know so. If the mind fabricates emptiness, know so. There is no need to cling to any of them. Behind the mind's fabrications lies craving, tanha. Behind craving lies ignorance, avijja, the lack of understanding of the Four Noble Truths, especially the truth that body and mind are inherently unsatisfactory, dukkha. Ignorance leads to craving, the desire for the body and the mind to be happy, the desire for them to be free from suffering. craving drives the mind to fabricate and struggle. This restlessness of the mind is called becoming, bhava. Sometimes it manifests as becoming rooted in unwholesomeness, sometimes in goodness, and other times in emptiness. No matter the type of becoming, suffering always follows. Whenever the mind fabricates, mental suffering will inevitably arise. All fabrications share the same root: ignorance of the truth about the body and mind. Not seeing their true nature, the mind desires happiness and freedom from suffering. Yesterday, I reviewed the practice of a monk who has been learning with me for over 20 years. Day after day, he continues to fabricate, control, and suppress himself. For instance, when speaking, he adjusts his voice to sound refined, unnaturally perfect. He acts as though he is performing for a camera, always trying to appear flawless. Women and men alike do this, constantly trying to project a polished image. In the old days, people called this craftiness. We should learn how to simply be an ordinary person. How can we be ordinary? Simply by recognizing this craftiness. When there is a tendency to want to be refined, to look good, to appear ideal, just know it for what it is. These are all fabrications. Even while practicing, there is that same craftiness, the desire to be seen as a practitioner, meticulously adjusting posture, movements, speech, and even the way we eat, wanting to appear like a true practitioner. Not walking like others, not sitting like others, making sure our actions appear different from ordinary people. If we do not recognize these fabrications of the mind, they will overwhelm and dominate us. Unable to transcend them, we will never truly be ordinary. Fabrications rooted in evil are driven by greed, hatred, and delusion. Fabrications rooted in goodness, while seemingly virtuous, also stem from greed, not the desire for sense objects, but the desire for spiritual attainment, such as enlightenment or nirvana. Whenever the mind fabricates, whether good or evil, it arises from desire. The mind's fabrications are called becoming, bhava. We fabricate the state of becoming all the time. For example, as a company executive, the mind fabricates how to dress, act, and speak. As a teacher, or even a monk, one may fabricate an image of discipline and perfection. Deep down, this arises from self-centeredness. Fabricating goodness does not lead to mindfulness or wisdom. Simply know its nature as it is. If one is attached to fabricating goodness, overcoming it is much harder than overcoming the fabrication of evil. Most people, when practicing, oscillate between distraction and concentration. When they realize they have been distracted, they try to avoid being distracted, resulting in forced concentration. When they recognize that they are forcing concentration, they then try to stop forcing it. This, too, is a form of fabrication. Distraction is an unwholesome fabrication, apunabi sankhara. Forced concentration is a wholesome fabrication, punnabi sankhara. While the wholesome fabrications may lead to better rebirths as humans, devas, or brahmas, they do not lead to nirvana. The effort to not be distracted and not to force concentration is yet another form of fabrication, the fabrication of non-fabrication. anenjabi sankhara. The mind is constantly fabricating. Simply know so when it does. Be patient. Gradually observe the body and mind without trying to fabricate or manipulate them. Recognize fabrications for what they are, and one day you will transcend them. If you continue fabricating your practice, constantly strategizing how to improve, you will never escape fabrications. Constantly seeking ways to be good is itself fabrication. There will be no end to it. But if we simply recognize fabrications for what they are, without becoming engrossed in them, just observing the workings of the body and mind, then we are not reinforcing the fabrications. Our task is simply this: to observe, to simply know, to simply see. Whether awareness arises or not, there will be moments of mindfulness and moments of forgetfulness. That is the nature of the mind. We cannot force the mind to be mindful all the time. Just don't let it drift for too long. Some may misunderstand this, thinking they don't need to practice at all. They believe we should not cling to anything, assuming that practice itself is a form of attachment. They misunderstand my teaching of non-doing, assuming that they should just eat, sleep, and do nothing. That is a mistake. Even dogs eat, sleep, and do nothing. But that does not mean they will attain nirvana. Practice is necessary. What I mean by non-doing is not the absence of effort. In practice, it begins with the intention to observe, to be aware of whatever arises as an object of observation. Once the mind selects an object, it begins to analyze. How should I observe this? How can I cultivate awareness correctly? What will result from my practice? Do you see how the mind works? At the beginning of practice, there is an intention to observe, then a decision on an object, followed by thoughts about how to do it properly and what results it may bring. This tendency to analyze and seek results is an ingrained habit of the mind, a constant struggle, a restless search. One day, whether during practice or while listening to Dhamma teachings, this realization may suddenly strike, seeing the nature of fabrications for what they are, and in that moment, the mind steps beyond fabrication. Thus, we gradually observe these fabrications, becoming aware of how we create them. Whenever a fabrication arises, simply recognize it. See how every thought is a form of fabrication. Even the thought of not doing anything is still a fabrication, a foolish one at that. Some fabricate a sense of emptiness. All of these are fabrications. At the beginning of practice, the mind will fabricate. This is unavoidable. Just don't actively participate. Simply watch how the body and mind fabricate, and when you find yourself intervening, just recognize it. If awareness arises, seeing the mind's fabrications clearly, then the mind becomes an observer. Do not actively fabricate. Do not try to maintain the observing mind. There is no interference, only watching as the mind fabricates. You will see the mind seeking objects, the mind over-focusing, the mind intervening and forcing itself to be good. Gradually, as you recognize this, incorrect fabrications will diminish. The mind, by its nature, is conditioned to fabricate. But one day, a realization will strike. No one can force the mind to attain enlightenment. When the faculties are fully developed, the mind awakens by itself through maturity of practice. In summary, observe fabrications, but refrain from fabricating them yourself.